Welcome to Built to Finish. I'm your host, Stephen Pivnik. Join me each week as we explore the journeys of audacious goal setters. This includes experienced founders, CEOs, and entrepreneurs sharing pivotal moments that propel their success. We'll also be talking with endurance athletes who push the limits of physical and mental ability. This show is brought to you by Accenture, offering tailored, high-impact advisory services to help founders get to their finish line with a strategic acquisition or majority investor recapitalization. Let's get started. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Built to Finish. I'm thrilled to be talking to today's guest as he brings a wealth of experience and insight into the rapidly evolving world of advanced technology. He has helped numerous organizations streamline operations, enhance productivity, and reach their full potential through their strategic expertise in orchestration, automation, and AI. He played a key role in developing the first UiPath robot, cementing his reputation as a trailblazer in intelligent automation. He's the former director of Emergence Partners, and he is currently the CEO of Innate. Please welcome James Hall.
Hi, Stephen.
Hey, it's great to have you here, James. Thank you very much for joining the show today.
I'm delighted to be here. Thank you very much for inviting me.
You bet. So first question is always about your previous exit. Please share some of the strategies that you put into place to help you maximize the results for all the stakeholders.
So I started my company, Gen4, and this was in 2012 and actually sold it in 2017. So we built a company that was delivering robotic process automation. It's an automation tool used in operations. And first thing for me was, what do I do to build enterprise in that organization to maximize my outcome? The other thing is knowing from an early stage what kind of buyer I wanted. So at the time, I had a view that I wanted to build something that was suited to big global technology and outsourcing firms. So I kind of built something that was suited to delivering that next wave of services, and kind of hoped that was going to be the case that they wanted it when the time came around, right? And it went a bit quicker than I thought. We were only at it just under 5 years before we hit a point that made sense to sell. So to maximize the exit strategy, I guess there was the one thing: know what you're building and for who, right? And so it was early on. What I was ultimately building with Gen4, we provided tech services, but actually I was trying to build a digital labor pool effectively, using technology to do a whole bunch of work that otherwise people were doing. And these were, repetitive, fairly, uninteresting tasks that have been shipped actually quite often around the world to lower cost locations to be delivered. And I think that had been for a while. Let's take labor arbitrage as a way of delivering things at a lower cost, whereas in fact automation was a great answer, right? They were ripe for automation. Just the technologies and the cost point hadn't arrived yet. So we got onto that wave, and ultimately I was building a way of automating out some of that activity. And anyone who runs a business process outsourcing firm or a services firm would want access to being able to deliver on that. So we kind of built with that end in mind. There were 3 levels by which we built a valuable business or value into the business. The first one was, we delivered consulting type services. The issue with that is that you'll only attract 1.5, maybe 2 times multiple if your growth rates are good enough, because you have to keep selling that work every 6 months, right? Deliver a project, then you got to do the next one. So for me,
right, so project-based revenue versus recurring revenue,
correct,
always yields a smaller multiple.
Exactly. And by the time we sold, we got about 50% annual, annuity services revenue. So these were people who were buying outcomes from these digital technologies that they just needed to keep buying from us, right? And to do the work. That was valuable because I think once you're into a decent services revenue, you might be thinking 2-3 times if you've got the right growth rate. But then we underpinned all of that with some technology that underpinned our delivery mechanism. So we have multiple clients, but actually some things we built enables us to manage, maintain, ensure smooth operation of those digital technologies. And that was valuable in its own right because that was kind of IP that could be leveraged across a much bigger base of activity. And that was a real multiplier. When you start doing things like that, you get a real multiplier on the value of the business.
So you went from pure services to then technology-enabled services.
That's correct. And that was always the direction of travel. So we had some interesting things to say in that front. We were also doing quite a lot of innovation around the types of technology we work with. You mentioned one of them in the introduction, UiPath. We implemented their first ever RPA bot, helped them build their orchestrator, but of course we became experts in how that worked. We were also pioneers in starting to bring together different components of, let's call them digital workers. So intelligent data processing, IDP, is where you could take unstructured data and start using AI to turn that into structured data. And that was really useful if you're trying to extract information to put into a process. We were linking that up and creating more value, if you like, in the services that we were delivering on. And that was kind of the advent of, what's being called now, business orchestration automation technologies, which Gartner is sort of naming a whole category as an assemblance of these types of activities. So we were kind of pioneers, real front runners in what we're doing, as I'm sure many of your subscribers and readers, are. They're trailblazing and doing things. And it's there's always that challenge of can you do something like that, but also make it economic and commercially benefit, right? So it's one thing having an idea, building great technology, but you've also got to get into a place that people want to use it and will buy it from you. So commercializing the model was another key piece. So there's some pretty clear metrics around what you need to achieve in gross margins on PS type or professional service type work, and on technology enabled services. And you start going north of 50% gross margins, and then you get very interesting.
I'm sure that led to to an optimal exit for you and the rest of the company. So did you have other shareholders in your organization? What did your cap table look like? And was there any cleanup required prior to your exit?
Well, I actually had a very clean. So I mean, this is back to Gen4, which is of course the one founded in 2012, sold in 2017 to Accenture. Actually, I bootstrapped that the whole way, and so on the cap table it was myself, and then we had a bunch of options with staff and key members of staff. So the cap table, in some respects, was pretty simple in that there was one major shareholder. I didn't have to ask permission. Perhaps I asked permission at home, right? Family permission. After putting them through a long weekends and me working hard, right? They asking permission for when was the right time to think about selling the business. And it was that was largely a family decision, and we kind of also I had a number in my head, right? And talk about going into the sale, what was enough, what made sense, and because it was really just my decision. I wanted to reward the people who've been working with us, so that was built into some of the options and how that was structured. But equally, we come to a kind of a point where we got big enough that bootstrapping the business wasn't really a reality going forward, and we either needed to take some kind of investment, merge, or be bought. And it just so happens, we looked at all those options and we got a really good option to sell, and that made sense for us. So once that decision was made, as I say, largely a family decision, working through it was relatively simple. I say we sold to a very big organization in Accenture. It was quite telling when we went into our first due diligence call. pretty sure almost as many people logged on from Accenture to do due diligence as we had in our company at the time. So it was, we thought, well, we might have quite a big task ahead of us here. But as it happened, they right sized, what was needed to work through it pretty quickly and pragmatically, and it turned out to be, a very positive experience in the way Accenture dealt with us and that we managed to integrate.
No, that's awesome. It's good to hear that that went smooth because we hear a lot of horror stories about how complicated and stretched out due diligence can become. But you said something really important. You had a number in mind, which I think is great advice for entrepreneurs and founders. It's really hard to go through a process of planning your exit when you don't have a number in mind. Once you do, it becomes a lot easier to march, towards that number and then to execute on an exit strategy. So one piece of advice I always give founders is, let's go through an exercise, and there's definitely several methodologies available to help, figure out what that number is. But once that number is set in stone, it becomes a lot easier to march towards that exit.
Yeah, and I think that was really important for us, because you can always sit back and go, oh, this time next year it could be double that,
Of course.
and then you're always chasing whatever it is you don't know, right? Because your mind was going to change, you evolve. But the other great thing about having a number is actually, you go through some of the metrics we just talked about as well, in terms of how you drive enterprise value into your business. You can start relaying your exit number back to the things you need to achieve in the business. So, once you've got your margins at the right place, once you've got your growth rate right, once you've got the revenue number there, then it's time to start looking, because you're at the point you said you were going to exit.
Sure. I mean, I believe that it makes the decision-making process of running a company a lot easier, because if you know you're going to sell and you know the number you're shooting for, then when it comes time to make strategic decisions, you can easily say, if I do this, will that help lead to this number at an exit? And if not, you just don't do it. So it makes the decision-making process go a little smoother, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Because there's so much flying around when you do one of these things anyway, right? As much as you can make solid, and in all of that, the better. So you don't want to be second guessing that thing while you're going through it, frankly.
Exactly, exactly. So, how did you deal with letting the news out about the sales process within your company? Did you keep it very confidential amongst a small group of people, or was it widely known that you were going through an exit process?
Yeah, well, interesting. It's widely known that that's what we were going to do. So when it did happen, it wasn't really a surprise. And I think I've always tried to run with any organization I'm in with as open and transparent culture as we can find, right? So, sharing. It's much easier to share ups and downs of anyone founding a business and starting a business knows not every day is a good day, right? But it's much easier to deal with those issues and everything else if you have those clear lines of communication, that trust that comes with it. And being honest, right? We're looking to build and sell a business, and it would happen at about this time. So, whereas you don't want to distract everybody with, oh, this is interesting, there's one over there or there's one over here, because these inbound things come in a lot, right? There's a lot of opportunity to waste time and focus. Equally, that engaging in reasonably early, once you're into a solid process, is well, certainly for us it was the right thing to do, because all of the information, the things you need to surface for due diligence, and so on, needs to come from the team, not just from an individual. And whereas you still need to be able to run and manage the business, you need their help. So that was kind of the approach. Let's be open about what we were trying to achieve, so there's no surprise or shock as when it happens, or it's not such a big deal. Equally, try not to get people distracted until you've got something very real. And I didn't go through we didn't get an advisor to time a sale. it wasn't something we spent weeks gearing up for. There were a few conversations I was having that then yielded a interest and ultimately an offer. And I did drive a lot of that activity on my own before we then had to engage more broadly to firm up the numbers.
Okay. So did you end up engaging an investment banker to go through the process, or did you drive it?
I drove it. And was that wise or not? I couldn't tell you. I couldn't tell you, to be honest, Steve. I did what felt right at the time, and I think because we were fairly focused on who we thought should buy us. I'd had a number of conversations with them by this point, right? And I was pretty open about what I wanted for the business, so we wouldn't have engaged until we'd hit that point, and then we stuck to it.
Got it. No, that's great. So you mentioned something interesting. So you were receiving a lot of inbound inquiries, and most successful companies will start receiving inbound inquiries. And I would caution entrepreneurs from chasing every single one of them, because in my personal experience, the vast majority of them are investors, or mostly private equity firms. Some junior staff member at a private equity firm that's kicking the tires to see to get information, A, about the company, B, about the industry, to see what type of trends you're experiencing. And for me personally, because of my lack of experience at the time with exit processes, I went down every single rabbit hole with all these inquiries saying, "Oh my God, here's this company. They're really, really interested in buying mine." So there's you definitely have to do a little bit of due diligence ahead of time before going down these rabbit holes with inbound inquiries.
Well, let's face it. I think anyone who started and built a company, it becomes very adept at talking about it. And you think about it, right? We had to knock on so many doors and talk to people about what we do to even get the first one opened. And I think it's quite easy for us to feel flattered by someone's interest. Oh, I'm interested in what you're doing in the space you're in, that you give them your time. And you're right, you can waste so much of it because exactly as you say, Stephen, there's a whole army of people wanting to learn from you about a market space they may or may not be interested in. They may not even have a particular, thematic interest from investing in that space. They're just doing some ground roots research. And the other thing is they encourage you to share stuff about your company, but careful what you yield at that point as well, because they tend to have notebooks and write down everything about your revenue and your growth rate and so on. So next time they call you, they'll be checking in to see how your progress is. And I'm not saying that it's just another thing you might have to justify in if you get into a further discussion at some point. But I'd just be slightly coy around a lot of those inbound calls, and as you say, qualify.
Yeah, that's definitely good advice, because they will hold everything you say against you, and they are taking copious notes. And if you promise them like a 20% growth rate for the following year, and you come in at 19%, they're gonna they're gonna want to know, like, hey, what happened? Why didn't you make that extra 1%? And so again, just be really careful.
Who needs that?
Exactly, exactly. So with this due diligence team at Accenture, were there any surprises that came out of the woodwork as you were marching towards a closing date?
Not particularly. I mean, one of the things is, we were, of course, we were a UK company selling to a US company. So probably one of the bigger things was we weren't doing US GAAP revenue, and so there were some shifts around on how that was perceived and how we'd been looking at things. Nothing that ultimately came to bite us, but there's always some things on the way that you go, okay, they understand that. They have a different picture in the world than we have. So there was a piece around how we recognize some of the gross margin on software that we were selling through with our services. So that was that. I think one of the things in a due diligence process, don't underestimate the need that you need to have your finances in order, and a good understanding of and very able to talk everyone through where the numbers are, what's on the balance sheet, all of those good things. So that there's a lot of time absorbed into that part of it. I think being tight commercially and all around all the legals in your contracts, those are the things that will be really material on whether you'll hold the price that you've been talking about or how much it's going to be challenged. Those things will really matter. But then the other reason, if you're selling to someone like Accenture with the the rigor that goes into how they employ and their employee contract, all of those things have to really, really be in place, right? You need to know that you've got fair hiring policies, that the contracts that people working to are, appropriate for what you're doing and in place. All of that stuff has to be there. So it will all be gone through, right? And you just got to be ready to cover all the ground. And I'd say, it's probably not a bad thing to rehearse what that process might look like, or what will be discovered as you go through it.
Yeah, I think that is key. Rehearsing the process and actually, being ready for due diligence is definitely going to help the process go smoother, because once it starts, it's going to go from 0 to 100 miles per hour super quickly. So, and any rehearsal ahead of time with somebody that's been through it is going to be beneficial.
Yeah. Stephen? Did you manage to do a rehearsal, or were you there for the first time when you did it?
I was there for the first time when we did it, and coincidentally, it ended up being with the same exact company. So the same company that made us an offer to acquire it, took us through the due diligence process, and the deal fell apart in the 11th hour. I'll spare the audience the reasons for it. There's a million and one reasons why deals fall apart, but this one did not go to close. So we had our dry run, and then 3 years later, it was the same exact company that came back, and it was basically a complete repeat of the due diligence process. So the second time around, it went significantly smoother because we had just gone through with not just a due diligence, but a due diligence with the same exact company, and then this one ended up closing well.
Right. And you knew what to expect and you were geared up for it. Right. And that's interesting. Your story was, somewhat by chance, these things that happened in that way. Right. But you were very pleased that you'd been through one of those exercises before you got the ultimate exit. Right. And it's an easy one to cover off, and it's painful, right? You go, why would I do that to myself? But actually it's a lot more painful when someone's scrutinizing everything you do and seeing if you're worth what you say you are.
Exactly, and we benefited from the front. I call it 4 different exits. Like we had an asset sale in the late '90s, which an asset sale is very, very similar to an all-out acquisition. You're probably going to go through like 99% of the same type of due diligence. So we went through that. So we had some experience in due diligence. We've also did like 2 major licensing deals. One with IBM and one several years later with Microsoft. And the licensing deals were so substantial that there was I would call it mini due diligence, even though that they were just licensing software. They went through a lot of the activities that a due diligence process would entail. So we definitely, had a lot of experience, going through due diligence, which helped with the final one.
Yeah, good. And beware the warranties, right?
Oh my God, yes. Well said. Definitely. So did you end up working for Accenture for a certain amount of time?
Yeah, I did. So the deal was structured as many people find, if you're particularly you're taking in a team, and the acquisition is about putting growth into the organization you're joining. They want you to hang around. So part of it was I had a 3-year earnout. Part of it was making sure that the people and the IP and assets that we were taking in were nested successfully into the acquirer. And then the other thing was actually trying to, live out those earnings expectations, right? The growth expectations that they had of us. So, what I would say on that is you expect it, but try and be sensible about how much you gear to the earnout versus what you take up front. Sounds like obvious advice, but if you leave too much to chase, it can make it quite a miserable experience. Whereas I think they've got to be buying you for what you're bringing, and yes, there's some upside, but we ended up with, I think the earnout was roughly 30%, and some of it was actually just about time that went by, and some of it was against targets and performance. So, 30% of the overall number was tied into that earnout, and probably about 15% actually against revenue targets subsequently. So, that felt fair, and actually it all worked very well because it all came through. But I think having gone through that, you want to be you want to bring the value that was promised, and so in a way, it's good to have that thing, but equally, you don't want to go in there and feel like, oh, I've got so much to do, I've left too much on the table, and you've got to get the right balance for you.
Yeah, so entrepreneurs have mixed feelings about earnouts, right? So some feel that it's a great way to increase enterprise value, though there's work to be done to obtain it. And others feel that an earnout is a lawsuit waiting to occur. It sounds like you had a really good experience with the earnout and you actually realized what was promised.
Yeah, that's correct. We did realize what was promised. It was a positive experience. I think, part of that was it was important, but it wasn't so material that it would end up as a lawsuit, right? And that's the point of trying to get it right up front. Um, so yeah, for us that balance worked, and depending on what the company's being acquired for, and what the ultimate goals of the acquiring organization are for that acquisition, then it's hard to say what the right thing to do is. But the other thing is it needs to be achievable in there, because what can you control and what can't you control, and what kind of help are you going to get, and what kind of hindrance are you going to be given. And okay, everyone's circumstances are different, but eyes wide open going into those things, as I'd say, getting the balance right between what you take up front and what you're putting at risk.
Agreed, agreed. So you went over to Accenture for several years.
Yeah. No, actually, I had one more thing to say about that, Stephen. I think, going to Accenture, and it's, you've got to, when you're being acquired, think about who's buying you, in the sense that if you're going to spend 2 or 3 years there, you may as well enjoy it. So it should be the best time of your life, right? You build something, you had a view, you want to sell it. You don't want them to go into a really negative experience, because it just clouds it all. And I'd say in that process of someone's buying me, someone's put a really flattering number on the table, or someone's put something slightly less so, but culturally, you're going to enjoy one more than the other, and is it going to be good for the team that go in there? And so there are a broader set of things, and I just, I'm really pleased that my subsequent tenure at Accenture didn't cloud or frustrate the positive experience that it was. And maybe that's just me, right? And I don't tend to look for fights if I can help it, but that was quite a conscious decision that I'm going to be there and I want to enjoy it.
That's definitely that's good advice. Very good advice. So you stayed there for 3 years. You enjoyed it. You got your earnout, and then you were bitten by the entrepreneurial bug again.
Yeah, I was. It was kind of interesting that anyone who sold their business probably, certainly in our kind of sector, probably does it at a stage in life, and sufficiently that you can probably think about hanging up your spurs and going, well, I don't have to do anything more, right? And all those things I wanted to do, I'm going to go off and do them. And for me, that was getting my pilot's license. There were certain places I just wanted to go on some places I just wanted to walk around, go hiking and adventure, and spend more time on skis and things like that. So you do that stuff and you go, life's wonderful. It was interesting because my leaving Accenture was at the same time as lockdown, going into lockdown. And that was psychologically kind of interesting because, you think you've got all these freedoms, and then all of a sudden you haven't, right? You can't go anywhere or do anything. And then you get quite frustrated quite quickly, and you realize
You finally have the time and a lot of money to go do all the things you wanted to do, and now the entire world is locked down.
then you can't do any of them. Yeah, exactly. So you kind of have this opportunity. I think the most important thing is you get to choose how you're going to engage with life and work. But work's such an important element of life. You know, when you work with people and you work in industries, you kind of have your tribe, right? And you enjoy the day-to-day interactions with people. It's people you go on your mission with and enjoy working with and achieving things with and sharing disappointments with. And you know, all of that for me is an important part of my makeup. And I think, you know, you always hear about people who've retired and they stop doing anything and decline can happen, right? So uh, for me, there's this sort of a curiosity around wanting to be at work, the love of being part of the team and achieving something. And for me, more especially, I invested in kind of in and around the sector I know in technology services and um, software companies. But all of that was part of, you know, it was kind of a continuation of the journey that I'd had with Gen 4 anyway. It was just, you know, it was the next stage or the next things that would be slotted into place. So all relevant, if you like, to the journey I had before. Um, and I've carried on ever since, but in a way that really suits me, right? That really hard lift at the very beginning of setting up a company. Oh my, I'm not sure I'd have another one from the very bare bones and beginning again, but I really enjoyed investing and engaging in different ways with these teams and companies. And most recently with Innate, Innate was a partner of Gen 4.
Okay.
We started working with Innate in 2016, and it was really important technology and how we saw the world and what we were delivering in tech services. When we got acquired by Accenture, I then became an investor in Innate and a director. And then it was about 2022, I joined Kit, who's the founder and CTO, to join us as CEO. And you know, that's part of a continuation of a journey.
That's great that you had an opportunity to do that. So, can you compare and contrast? What was it like being a CEO of a company that you founded, that you bootstrapped from day one, to now being a CEO of another company that you're not a founder of?
Yeah, that's you know, I've never been asked that question, Dave. It's a really interesting one. I think with Gen 4, you take the pressure of the fact that you founded it. You feel the weight of responsibility in a different way. Um, in you know, how it performs and what it's doing and that was a feeling. I don't think it meant I engaged with the team in Gen 4 in a different way, but it was just that, you know, that extra burden, I think, that you know, when you're trying to help us succeed and dealing with things that were difficult when they came through. It all came as a little bit more of a gut punch, if you like, when something went against you. I think I'm better able to ride the ups and downs now, but that might just be, you know, experience builds up over time. But it's also yeah, I'm more a servant and a passenger in Innate because it's not one I founded. I do have a strong connection through its history, and indeed what it's doing now was, you know, was very informed through the engagement that I had with Innate with Gen 4 back in 2017. So, if you like, it's you know, it's got that continuity, it's got that history, and hence I have that same level of affection for it because I've known it and seen how it developed. And I've known the team, and I love dearly the team in Innate, always have, and it's a pleasure to sort of be part of that and help them succeed and help them go through the this journey too, right? And to build, and ultimately we'll look to exit from Innate as well with a successful exit, because I think we're in a really interesting place to be acquired in 4 or 5 years' time.
That's great. Well, kudos to the founder of Innate, because it's hard for a founder of a company to let go of the reins and to hand over the CEO seat to somebody else. And kudos for the founders for recognizing the need to do so. And I'm sure they're going to see a lot of success as a result.
And Kit is a wonderful person and a fantastic person to work with. Not least he's a genius, technical genius, and a wonderful evangelist. And actually, when I say I'm here to serve, so I kind of feel like that. It's to allow him to be able to do what he really enjoys and actually is very brilliant at. So that's probably the biggest difference. But that's an attitude thing for me as well. And it's part of, I think a lot of people will feel this if you have lifted and exited a company, what you go through as a life experience is pretty damn profound. Um, and any way you can share and help others, I think we all have a sense of that afterwards. You want to kind of pass on knowledge, or you become more of you become more coaching in your style. You might see or appreciate things in advance of when they land on you. Have a bit more insight and awareness. But ultimately, it's a pleasure to be with a fabulous team doing something just really important in our space. So I feel I am the one who's been given the great opportunity.
No, it's great. It sounds like you're definitely enjoying it, and I'm sure you're making a difference. So can you just share a little bit about what Innate does and who your target market is?
Sure, Innate is so we're work orchestration. Effectively, we help companies that deliver business services, therefore have lots of people in their operations. We help orchestrate the work through those operations and automate the work in those operations. So it's effectively a software tool that sits above things like ERP systems, like SAP or otherwise, and deals all the inbound requests for service. Could be emails, it could come in through a schedule, allocates that work through workflow to the resources, and they could be human resources or digital resources in this day and age, right? There's a lot more technology doing work than there used to be. So especially with the advent of large language models and the capabilities they're bringing online. And then to organize that work all the way through to it's delivered at the end of it. And you know where your work is, you know how much it's costing you, you know how well utilized everyone is in the operation. So fundamentally, you're yielding a whole bunch of data and information, but you also, and it's becoming sort of more known as orchestrating the work. By orchestrating the work, actually, you're laying the foundations to be able to automate it at scale. And that's the big prize here. A lot of automation projects are, coming up subpar because to do it at scale, there's lots of examples of, random acts of automation when you look across organizations, but who's really doing that at scale? And I think until you really understand the work, where it is, what it is, who's doing it, it's very hard to get your head around the automation piece. So we facilitate all of that.
Awesome. Fantastic. Well, congratulations on all the progress that you're making there. I'm sure with your prior experience, as you march towards the next exit, it's going to be significantly smoother because of what you've accomplished in the past.
Yeah, one would hope so. But I guess these things have enough permutations that they could look very different. Let's see. But having said that, they're like we talked about due diligence and knowing what your number is. They're all things that you can do to simplify the journey.
Exactly. James, thank you very much for joining the show today and sharing all of these experiences that you've had and offering the advice that you have to fellow founders and entrepreneurs that are in the thick of it right now.
You're very welcome. Delighted to come and speak to you, Stephen, and congratulations on all your efforts to put this down in writing and to get those stories retold. It's super valuable, and hopefully, in part of what I said, help someone somewhere as they go on their journey.
Oh, it definitely will. It definitely will. Thank you again so much. What is the best way for folks to contact you if they have any follow-up questions?
Yeah, well, I'm on LinkedIn, James Hall, CEO Innate, or I'm sure if they wanted to contact you, Stephen, you're very welcome to put them in touch with me subsequently.
Fantastic. We'll put that information in the show notes. Thank you again, James. And thank you, everybody, for listening to and watching another episode of the Built to Finish podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please do like and subscribe. And if you found any of the information shared here today by James useful to somebody in your network, please do share this episode with them. Thank you very much for tuning in. That's a wrap for this episode of Built to Finish. Thank you for tuning in. For show notes and more details, head over to podcast.stephenpivnik.com. Special thank you to our sponsor, Acresis, offering tailored, high-impact advisory services that help founders get to their finish line with a strategic acquisition or majority investor recapitalization. Catch you next week.